3. So why don't we, there you go, I see you now. We could get started, and so I will say I'm Dan Crimmins, and thank you for being on the webinar today, and thank you for your interest in the AUCD Leadership Academy, a joint venture of AUCD and the Technical Assistance Agreement with both the Administration on Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities and the Maternal Child Health Bureau. I'm at the Center for Leadership and Disability at Georgia State University. We hosted for the first time the Leadership Academy last year, and we're planning to host the second iteration of the Academy in June of this year. So we'll talk all about that today. What we'll talk about today, on the slide that is showing right now, we have the 4 signposts headed with leadership, but then talking about that it is dependent on empowerment, values, encouragement, and vision. And what we will do today is talk about what participants will learn, how they will learn, what do past participants say about the experience, how do you apply, and then have a question and answer period at the end. We think that this should take about, I'll say 45 minutes to an hour. As you see up here, we have next to our questions, what will participants learn? We have red. We have our slides will be coded to match these colors as we go to them and address these points. So what will we learn? The slide that's up repeats that question and then has a graphic image of from last year's Academy. It says, if you want to lead people, you've got to love people first, a quote from Cornell West. And that was something that was captured by our graphic facilitator. And she sent that to me today, and I said, oh, let me put that up on the slide here as part of one of the themes of the work that we do. We have several components to the structure of the week that we spend together. We will visit the National Center on Civil and Human Rights, which is here in Atlanta. We will plan an introduction by Mark Johnson, a pretty prominent disability advocate who's based here in Atlanta. And this will provide us an opportunity to talk about the history of disability rights and the independent living movements, the evolution of disability policy, current issues in national policy, state level issues, and then advocacy. Last year, Andy Imperato was able to join us, Andy, the executive director of AUCD, and we will hope that he will join us again this year. I believe it's on his schedule for him to be here on this date, the first day of the meeting. The work that we do together is organized around the framework of courage and renewal. And we have a facilitator, Matthew Williams, who worked with us last year, who did I think a fabulous job. And I'll let some of our alumni who will be talking later speak to that. Really, it is a week of self-reflection. The reason we chose Courage and Renewal is that it has a strong roots in community organizing with groups that have been disenfranchised. It really reflects extensive experiences with growing leadership, with people learning and working toward solving complex issues. More than 20-year history of the approach provides a forum for exploring our professional and organizational goals and our visions, values, and our commitments. And then we really do use that to support the people who will come to us to support their resilience and their commitment to creating communities that will recognize and honor difference and diversity. And the framework works well within this 1 week experience with a range of other topics that we'll be covering. We will talk about community alliances. We will have leaders of UCEDs and other disability organizations coming in to talk about partnerships that did come together to solve complex problems. We will try to create the space where people discover their resources. We also use the framework of collective impact that has an emphasis on breaking down some of the work that we've often done or long conducted in silos, and how do we come together to focus on sustainable change. And collective impact uses these 5 conditions as the framework of creating a common agenda, developing shared measurement and metrics, working in a manner that's mutually reinforcing, communicating continuously, and establishing a backbone organization. So we'll have time together in the week to say how that might be applied to the work that the participants are doing, will be doing back home after their return. We do a self-exploration of strengths in leadership. We used an approach called Values in Action via an assessment of 24 character strengths that we appreciate the fact that that describes in everyday language sort of who you are based on strengths and relative strengths, and then an appreciation of sort of who do you look for in folks that you will collaborate with, or both, I'll say, complementary, and sometimes why do we perhaps have different approaches to things in terms of what are the relative strengths that we all bring to these. Folks will be asked to conduct that ahead of time, to complete that ahead of time, and you will have an opportunity to discuss them in small groups. We find that this really helps us to have a vocabulary to discuss these things together. So I have a slide up that then shows the sort of a graphic, the AUCD Leadership Academy based on, utilizes Courage of Renewal and Circle of Trust as an approach. It emphasizes the history of advocacy, disability rights, and independent living movements. It provides opportunity for self-awareness and self-reflection of personal and organizational strengths. Looks to see how those might be applied using the framework of collective impact and through different partnerships and networking with communities that we all work with. So we've just discussed what participants will learn. And let me go next to the slide that says, okay, how will participants learn? We talked about the pedagogical underpinning. So, the fancy word that says, how do we teach and how do we convey this information? And we keep coming back to 3 important constructs that, that underlie our work in this area. One is the universal design for learning. The next is cultural and linguistic competence. And the third is learning through experience. And I'll expand on each of those in a moment. The next slide is headed with universal design for learning, which refers to, in the process of interaction, how do we have multiple means of representation, the information we present? How do we have multiple means of action and expression, the way we ask people to, in fact, interact with us relative to the learning? And how do we ensure that we engage folks in the learning process? We try to be very sensitive to our print materials being accessible to folks at different levels of reading sophistication, and that we provide information to people in different venues of different modalities of print, video, and audio. During our presentations, and we'll see a slide on this in a moment, we used graphic facilitation to collect the flow of information that's being provided, and I think some of the responses to the program. Our graphic facilitator, Brittany Curry, I showed you her Cornell West quote in the first slide, and here there's a way of capturing both people and impressions and sort of key elements that emerge from the learning. The cultural and linguistic competence, we want to ensure that faculty and participants.
Well, yeah, you can do it, but you have to get unmuted before that.
Ken, I'm picking up your voice here. The faculty and participants from diverse backgrounds represent diverse backgrounds, perspectives, and lived experiences. And that during our time together, we want to support participants' resilience and commitment to creating a community of leaders and advocates that honors difference and diversity.
Hey, Evan and Drew. Evan. Seriously, go outside.
Somebody's microphone is open and he just had to send the pup outside.
Sorry.
That would be Crystal.
Sorry, I swear I was muted. Sending the kids outside because it's 80 degrees in Virginia.
Oh, it's either a pup or a child, huh? Hi, Crystal. Experiential learning means that while we're together, we really try to pace this time together to allow both for learning and reflection, providing opportunities for small group discussion and problem solving, time with the Academy faculty and peers for exploration. We have a schedule of activities that for follow-up during the year after the Academy, and for both coaching and discussion with what we call self-reflection allies. The ally groups are formed during the Academy week, and we anticipate we'll meet together about every other month over the course of the year following the Academy. We've had one of our Leadership Academy faculty facilitate these groups. I think the groups are about many of them have completed 3 of the 4 scheduled meetings, and again, we can hear a little bit about the meaning of that and the utility of that from our alumni who are on the call. We also ask folks to identify a leadership coach in their home organization with whom they can kind of have a chance to talk over the course of the next year as they're putting, I guess formally acting on commitments that they make during the face-to-face training in Atlanta. So we've just discussed how participants will learn, the universal design for learning, the graphic facilitation, experiential learning, the self-reflection ally groups, and then the coaching. So what do AUCD Leadership Academy participants say about the experience? And I'm going to yield my seat to Mark Crenshaw, and he's going to give some of our folks who are on the call a chance to talk a little bit about their experience.
Good afternoon. So I noticed that a number of the 4 of the Leadership Academy alumni from last year are on the call with us today, and we've just asked them to share briefly about their experience. And so the first person, the slide that's in front of me is from Shonda Dunn. And so, Sean, if you're willing, would you unmute yourself and talk a little bit about your experience?
Yes, awesome. Hi, everybody. This is Sean. I am a clinical social worker at the University of Tennessee Bowling Center, and I'm basically just going to kind of give a brief overall description and kind of focus on some things as well. But first, the experience that we went through with the Leadership Academy, also with Matthew, it was probably one of the best experiences that I have had just as a young professional. It was something, while it kind of gave you that ability to kind of focus on yourself as a professional, as in a leadership position, it also really allowed for us to focus on our inner selves as leaders. So we weren't just kind of taking that attack on the professional side, but we're also taking it at personal growth as well. So we do have our leadership coaching calls, our ally group calls that we have every other month, every 2 months, we have them, and they are awesome. We had our groups formed during the actual academy, and we were able to meet with everyone and start to engage in this process of self-discovery. while we were doing that, I think one of the benefits that we had was the opportunity to be able to speak freely, and really have the floor to really engage in this aspect of like self-directed learning, basically. As we meet throughout the year, we focus on our goals that we set. Sometimes those goals that we set during the academy change throughout the year. Mine in particular definitely changed after I went to the Leadership Academy, and I find myself going in a different direction than I thought that I was trying to go in before. But we have about 4 or 5 people in our group. We do have our facilitator who facilitates, but really they're just there to make sure that we're kind of going by our touchstones that Matthew has set for us. Something that we always bring in is our strengths as well. So we continue to talk about individuals and our different situations that we have going on, whether it be at our center, whether it be personally or professionally. We definitely have that support from each other during our ally group calls. And those calls are so meaningful. Like sometimes I literally cannot wait to have because I'm just like writing down stuff from the call. Like, okay, this is something that I want to talk about in my call. Or sometimes I'll find myself reaching out to someone in my ally group to have a conversation with them, because we have definitely built trust up with each other. So it's great to feel like we have leaders, like these comrades in our entire system and within the network that are able to work together and have a really great sharing experience. I don't think that I talk highly enough of it just because I'm a younger professional. I'm not in, and I think this is just important, to kind of wind down my talk so I don't talk forever. But I am a younger professional and a younger leader, like an emerging leader, but also a leader. And something that was important to me was just kind of finding my place, just being so young. And there are so many different types of people within their career and within the professions that you don't think of yourself as a leader until you actually go to the academy and you see all the different definitions of a leader and how that kind of can consist. So anybody can go. You don't have to be in a higher position. You can just be like a therapist, just like me. So yeah, so that's all I think I really have to say.
Thanks, Sean. I'm grateful. So we're getting a little bit of background noise. So I just ask you if you can to mute your audio until we get to the point where you have something you want to ask or say. So the next alumni who is on with us is Julie Espinosa, who works at the Reach Center for Independent Living in Plano, Texas, as the assistant director. Julie, can you hear us?
Yes. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I am not a young leader as Shonda. I'm an older leader, but this training, this leadership development, allowed me to start brand new with my leadership. It was very refreshing, very real, very spiritual. I've been to many leadership trainings, excellent trainings. I've facilitated many leadership programs. This one gave me approval to follow my passion and to have self-directed purpose. I was surrounded by very professional, academic, high-level people in this training, and they were all doing what I kind of call, and I don't want to scare anybody, but it's hippy-dippy. It was real. It was tapping into your own self for leadership. It wasn't following a textbook and a to-do list, and this is how you run a committee, and this is how you get assignments done in advocacy. They were tapping into themselves, and that was refreshing to see, and to see them open and grow right along with me. Every morning, you could choose to try a different technique, whether it was poetry or meditation or journaling, reading, walking, whatever might help you get quiet and focused in your own self. And that really allowed me to bring passion into my work. It was very powerful to find out when I did the strength assessment on my leadership that passion was one of my strengths, but yet I wasn't using it. I was being very academic. And so it changed my leadership. And as I changed my leadership, it was wonderful to see the effect that it had on those around me. It woke up their passion and their leadership. And so it was a completely different approach that I wish I had tried, decades ago. It's neat to see the trajectory of all the new paths that everybody that went through that training with me when we have our team meetings. I think everybody has done and gone further than they thought they would in different directions. And this training allowed us to accept new paths and the powerful changes in larger plans. That's very important because I think without this training, we would have all have gone on doing what we normally do, and we would not have said yes to the opportunities or felt comfortable that we were doing things the right way. It allowed me to see my place in the sun. There was an exercise where they put a map on the carpet, and it talked about the birth of movements and the death of movements and the transition and people that are deviating. And then you had to put yourself on the floor where you are in the transition of a movement. And so I was able to see a bigger picture, much bigger than I had ever thought of before, of where am I in the independent living movement? Where have I been? And which direction, because you had a couple of choices of which way you were going to go. And it gave me acceptance that I'm supposed to be passionate and open, that the time is right. You don't question things, you allow. And so this leadership training gives you approval, acceptance, and allowance. And I recommend it for anybody. Get the academic stuff under your belt another time, but start out with your spirit, your passion, and your purpose.
Thanks, Julie. I really appreciate your being with us today.
Thank you.
So Ken Mitchell, who was on his phone in the car, is our next alumni who we've invited to talk about his experience with the Leadership Academy. So Ken, if you're still with us, can you share about your experience a little bit?
Yes. First, I'll make sure you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. I'm driving, so. So my name is Ken Mitchell. I'm the Assistant Director for Center for Independent Living that serves Metro Atlanta Disability Link. And I had the opportunity to go to the Leadership Academy the first time. And I also want to say that I was lucky enough to be the one guy with all the wonderful women that were there. So at least I was number one in something there. Anyway, a couple of things that I would like to convey to the people that are there is that one of the things we did talk about different leadership styles, different ways of approaching things, and that was important to me. What I got out of it was different perspectives from not only being a self-advocate, but from the other organizations that were represented there. One of my particular goals was connecting different silos. And one of the things I would emphasize was that we have so much more in common than we had differences. You know, we're all kind of going to the same goals, maybe different ways or different ideas, but the goals were all the same. And one of the things that we did in our smaller groups was try to, connect that 10% differences that we had versus the 90% of the same goals that we have. And sometimes even in that 10% of differences, it was just the way of the approach. It was just the way of the style of leadership. So in our smaller groups, we found even that even in our approaches, which may have seemed different, it was quite a lot often the same. I noticed also when we did the strengths and the characteristics that there were, in my group anyway, that there was at least one or two of the characteristics we all had in the top 3 or 4, and I found that interesting. Others, they were way off, but usually there at least 1 or 2 that were in the same area. So some things that I would suggest if you have the opportunity. One is that to go through the leadership program. 2, be open to some new ideas and some new, at least for me, new thinking. 3, be receptive to all the other leaders that are there, because in actuality, you're all there for kind of the same thing. And 4, even though that characteristic thing doesn't say quite what you thought it would, it's probably more true than not.
Thanks, Ken. So I haven't actually seen, Tafa, are you on? So the other person who was invited was Tafa Beulah from you said in American Samoa, who's the director? I know I was on a call, we were on a ally call with Tafa yesterday, and because of some storms, she was having trouble staying connected. So Tafa, are you on? She's not good. If Tafa, if you're here and you're on mute, let us know that so we can add your perspective in as you're available. Okay. So the other thing we want to accomplish in this section of the presentation is to just give you a sense of the schedule for the Leadership Academy. As you can see, the most important date in this part of the application phase is that the deadline for applications is March the 2nd, 2018. We'll do a round of initial acceptances by March 15th, and everyone will be notified about the status of their application by the end of March. And then this slide is pretty simple. It just shows that the in-person, the 5-day intensive academy here in Atlanta will be June 24th to 29, 2018. That'll be Sunday to Friday of that week in June. And then this slide just gives you a little sense of the schedule for the week. With arrival being on the 24th between 3 and 3:45, with our opening session being around 4 p.m., dinners included on that first day. We concluded last year around 7:30 p.m. And then the daily schedule begins with optional meditation or mindfulness around 8:30, coffee and networking from 9 to 9:45, And the opening session typically Monday Monday to Friday begins around 10 a.m. So I want you to notice that one of the learning characteristics of this academy sort of has to do with later start times and that sort of thing to provide more time for sort of easing into the day and reflection. And so that's a commitment that we carry on throughout the week. When we originally created the structure for the academy, we got feedback from folks who were on the design team that, you often go to conferences or trainings and start the day at 8 or 8:30, and they're there until, in the same rooms until 7 or 7:30. And so we intentionally did not want to do that. You'll notice that on the last day, on the 29th, the departures will be about 1 p.m. And then on the right side of the slide, there's some highlights just to highlight the visit to the National Center on Civil and Human Rights with transportation provided and lunch provided on that day. Lunch provided on Thursday for participants, and then we do have a closing dinner for participants in the home of Dr. Crimmins. So we wanted to show you the sort of pre-training schedule. So there are 3 pre-academy webinars that we conduct to help prepare participants for their time in Atlanta. The first webinar will take place in April, and it will be sort of looking at who the partners are, disability partners are, and a sort of more in-depth introduction to the program. The May webinar, which will be pre-webinar 2, will be an introduction to the VIA, the Values in Action Strengths, Leadership Strengths Assessment, Character Strengths Assessment. And then the third webinar in June, right before participants come to Atlanta, is a webinar that is an overview of courage and renewal. So the next slide, so you can see the rhythm here is that there are pre-training, there is the week-long intensive, and then there are post-training webinars. I know that Dr. Crimmins mentioned this early in the presentation, but the post-training webinars are sort of topics related to topics that participants want to dive deeper into. So, for instance, we had post-training webinars this last time on sort of how disability serving organizations could engage in strategy to bring more people with disabilities to the table in leadership and conversation in organizations. We had a webinar about women in leadership and some issues related to that. That was facilitated by 2 women with disabilities who are in different leadership positions. And so there will be 4 of those post-training webinars. Self-reflection ally group meetings, which Ken and Julie and Sean all talked about. There are 5 of those over the course of the year, potentially more, depending on the schedule and what participants need. And then Sean also talked about her coaching meetings with her local coach. So we want there to be regular meetings with your on-site coach or your coach in your community over the course of the year. So in this section of the webinar, we talked about, we sort of heard from alumni from last year's academy. we talked about the schedules for the in-person academy, for the pre-academy webinars, and the post-academy activities. We want you to get a sense that our commitment here at the Center for Leadership and Disability in terms of this activity is for the entire year. It's not just for the 5 days you're in Atlanta. So, we try to engage you in conversations that prepares you, engage you during the 5 days you're here, and then engage you throughout the year in some activities that participants have found really helpful to continue their leadership journeys. So sort of the next question, and this is the fourth set of slides, and they're blue. But the question on these slides is, how do I apply? So the first slide here says, who should apply? We're looking for about 24 participants. As we're looking at the pool of applications, we'll be looking for diversity in terms of disability representation, in terms of race, ethnicity, in terms of participants' gender. And so we'll sort of take all that in account as we try to think about a diverse cohort and also from diverse positions within their organizations. So, we'll have advocate leaders and folks in those kinds of positions, and we'll have folks who are in senior leadership positions, and we'll have some folks who are emerging in their leadership. So they may be in an organization, but sort of, trying to identify next steps in a leadership trajectory. And so we'll be looking for that kind of diversity. So participants could be faculty and staff in University Centers for Excellence in Development of Disabilities, or in the leadership education in neurodevelopmental disabilities programs. They could be current and emerging leaders in state and national disability organizations. And they can also come from community and university, other community and university partnerships. So in terms of how you apply, there's the link to the application there on the Center for Leadership and Disability website. I also think you can, I know you can get the application from the AUCD website. So a complete application includes a current resume or CV, curriculum vitae, a letter of support from a senior organizational or agency representative. We want to know that there's a commitment on the part of the leadership in your organization for you to commit the time that is going to be necessary for you to get the most out of this experience. And so we want a letter sort of stating that there's a commitment in the organization that you're a part of to do that. And then the third thing is a completed 250-word biographical statement. And the application has specific questions that we hope will guide you sort of to craft that statement. So in this section, we discussed how to apply for the Leadership Academy, and we reviewed the components of a complete application. So this is probably the part that most of you came here for. The last part of our time together today will be a Q&A. So I will make sure that folks, the ones that I can control, that the mics are open on your Zoom. But if there are questions and answers, now would be the time for that. Yeah. So I'm wondering, hearing no questions yet, if if Sean or Julie or Ken, if you had anything that you wanted to add before that, that because of the time limit I imposed on you, you weren't able to share?
Hi, Mark.
Oh, go ahead, Ken. Sorry.
I actually had a question that a potential nominee had in the car. You want to know the actual distribution of costs and fees.
Dan, do you want to talk about costs? Okay. So the fees, the cost for attending is $1,000 for the week, and that includes you know, all of the meals that were included, the meals that were included on the schedule specifically, and materials and participation in the week-long academy.
Lodging and other meals,
Yeah.
and travel.
So lodging and travel and other meals that weren't delineated on the slide before are not included in that $1,000. Julie, did you have something you wanted to add about your experience?
Well, I limited it to how it inspired a lot of passion. If I had not limited it, there was just so much to say about it. Like I said when I was speaking, it's well worth the trip, the time, and the money. It does change what you do. I really appreciate the team that you walk away with that carries you forward, because leadership is a bumpy road, and it's nice to have people that you can just talk to and say whatever and get feedback and support or agreement. And you don't get that necessarily in your local area. And the mentorship, everything, it was just beautifully thought out. And I think a lot of things in the movement are changing because of it. So I recommend anyone that's hesitating because of the cost or the time, go on ahead and jump in.
And this is Sean. I just wanted to also add that I think Ken mentioned this, was that sometimes we tend to be afraid of something that's a little bit different than what we're used to. And so I would really just encourage anyone who's thinking about actually, applying, would be to really open yourself up to receive what the group gives and what Matthew also makes available, because sometimes we can be extremely hesitant, but the experience is so much more worth it than just remaining in our hesitation. So you're definitely challenged on a very personal level, in ways that you definitely probably didn't even think that you had been challenged before. So I think that it's really important to really open yourself up for receiving newness. And also the visit to the Civil and Human Rights Museum was amazing. And the genuine discussion that came afterwards was even more amazing. And to being able to reflect off of everyone it was great. So I just wanted to add that.
Thanks, Sean.
Can you hear me? It's me, Katie Bentley. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Katie, I can hear you.
Okay, I have a question. I wanted to know if you could talk a little more about the coaches. So I am with my state DD council. I am a former Lynn graduate, and my director approached me about taking this training, and I'm very interested. But I also am looking at the commitment, because I am the public policy coordinator here. So I am a very busy person. But I am really interested in this work. But I also know that if someone else has to be involved, I want to make sure that I'm understanding what their time commitment would be as well. I don't like to start something I can't finish.
Oh, we appreciate that for sure, Katie. I'm going to ask Dan to step in and address that.
I'll do this one. Yeah, the coaches, I'll say we have been deliberately vague on exactly what that means. But we have asked people to identify 2 potential coaches before they get here, but not necessarily to select until after they've essentially been through the process to decide who's the right person for me. We really structured it as think about meeting with that person once every maybe 2 months after the training experience over the course of a year. And one time where we've actually explicitly asked you to go out and watch them to do something, and one time you asked them to come and watch you do something. And again, do something is pretty broad, and because that's your call. The coaches, we anticipated that they might be folks that are either in a formal mentoring role, they might be someone from a community agency or university person that you want to have an interaction with, but that you don't have a natural way to connect to, or sort of natural way to connect to regularly. So the total commitment for the coaches we see is probably, I'm going to say 12 hours over the course of the year. It's not huge, but it's something. And we saw that as really as a way of connecting you locally. So, there's a lot of flexibility in it, is, I guess the other side of that, if that wasn't abundantly clear by my saying. It's this, it's that. Does that help, or did that muddle it more?
It absolutely does. It does help. I just, thinking about time commitment, it's important to make sure that it's something that once you start, you can actually finish it. And then also, I love networking. I loved my Lind experience. It was phenomenal and put me in places that I never imagined. So,
well, using that as an example, just real quick, and it could be that if it was right for you're with the council, but if the right person to sort of coach and bounce this off was someone from the Lend program, we would not have anything to say about that. That's more for you. The other thing, you mentioned being the policy director, and if I recall, the Texas legislature meets every other year. So, it could be that you don't schedule any coaching sessions during the legislative session because you're too swamped, but you organize it to be just before that or just after that. So. You have really the control there to not negotiate that with whoever you would choose.
Okay, and are these coaching sessions face-to-face all the time?
They need not be.
Okay, good to know. All right, great. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for your interest. Katie just turned her mic off. Is there anyone else who has a question? Well, either we were brilliant and insightful and concise and answered every question, or no, that must be what it was. We thank you for being on the call today. I appreciate you taking the time to be in the webinar. We covered these issues about sort of what and how we provide this experience and what we think and what people say that they gained from it, how to apply, and you've been we are happy to receive your questions. We have an email address, aucdacademy@gsu.edu. You can, there's information on our website that's shown on this contact slide, cld-gsu.org. We also have one of our folks, Jatavius Price, his phone number is there for if you had questions that you wanted us to respond to. So feel free to use any of those to contact us, and we would welcome your interest and we welcome your application. Is there anything from the folks at AUCD?
This is John. I think you did do a really nice job, dare I say insightful. and answering a number of questions that I had. So I think, especially to the folks who participated in the program last year, those insights were fantastic. I think very diverse as well. So speaking not only to the experience and what we can expect, but the level of depth. The word spiritual is one I'm remembering, and I have heard from other folks who participated as well that it's tough stuff to really design to get at who you are and why you do what you do and how you can do it better. So for me, this is reinforcing everything that I expected to hear on the webinar. So thanks to all of you.
Well, thank you, John. And just for the audience, John came on board at AUCD, I think either just before or right after we had completed this, but he had not been part of the development of the program. So I thank you very much for that comment, because that means a lot. So if there's nothing else, I'll do going once, going twice, going 3 times. Thank you again, and I'll say I look forward to seeing some of you in June, and happy to talk to any of you between now and I guess it's about 2 weeks from now when the application period closes. But please do send in an application, and we would love to be able to experience this week together. And thank you to our alumni presenters today. Your voices did provide an authenticity to this that is greatly appreciated, and I think I'm glad that you could say things that I would like to say, but you could say them in a way that was nicer than I would do. So appreciated. Be well all, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thanks.
Signing off.
So much.
Thank you.